there wasn't much experimentation with color in ceramics. You know, there wasn't much experimentation. I remember one reference point that I had early in my career in terms of a potter exploring color theory in a real way was Jean Boucher Taylor. I before meeting her, I really fell in love with her work first, you know. And I'm not saying I fell in love with Miss Boucher, you know, because she's a senior lady to me and so on, but just playing here. But yeah, I love her as a person though. I love her as a person. She's a wonderful person. So I loved her work. I really fell in love with it and started to follow her body of work. And Marjorie Keith as well. Marjorie Keith really used color in an extraordinary way. And when I looked at those two reference points, I said, you know, all right, how can I stretch this even further? And I started to look at the Art Deco period and how they approached form and color, how they approached the architecture of that time and so on. And then I started to create a body of work exploring color and how it interacts with form and how it evokes mood and so on. And I remember participating in an exhibition called the Young Professionals at the Pegasus Gallery. I think that was 2002. And you know, that body of work that I put in all sold out. And I really got excited. And I remember joining the Potters Association, and in 2003 I think I did my first exhibition with them. And at that time I was just making nice forms, and I remember making this big pot and it had some Chinese writings on it, and I felt so proud of myself because I could throw that big to begin with in my early stages. So throwing this big form, I was so excited that I threw something that big. But you know, the reaction to it wasn't all that great. It wasn't all that great at all. And I overheard somebody commenting on the piece, and they were saying, well, it's a nice form, but that's about it. And it really felt like it felt like a jolt, you know. But I decided to push the envelope and start experimenting even more with color. And I made a pot for the Revolution Gallery's teapot exhibition. They had a teapot show, and I made a teapot that mimicked a fire hydrant in terms of the form, and I called the piece Hot, you know, and I used a bold color on it, a bold orange red color, and contrasted it with black. And when I entered that competition, that teapot show and competition, I think I ranked second in it. But when it was featured in the paper, the reaction to the teapot was just outstanding. Everybody was talking about that teapot in the show, and person started to call me and ask me if I could design something similar for them, and you know, so I started to kind of develop a body of work after that Revolution show. And about 2004, I made a teapot using the same high contrast of black and that bold red. And when I fired the pot, you know, it didn't come out the way I wanted, because some of the colors kind of burnt around the black circle in the middle of it. And you know, I really was so disappointed. I kind of tossed it in the corner of my studio, but I had some fabric, so when it fell, it didn't break. But I really was indifferent to the pot. And my sister Marie, that I affectionately used to call Kerry, the entire family called her Kerry, you know, she saw the pot and she said, Wazari, this is so beautiful. Are you going to put this in your show? And I said, no, this didn't come out the way I wanted. And she kept insisting that I put it in the show. And a few months before, I was in a conversation with one of my favorite people in the world, Renna, and she was relating to me how she was making dolls for a number of years, over 30 years at the time. And her nephew, who is left-handed, because he's left-handed, he held the clay a particular way when he was making the hair. And when she saw him make it and look at the texture in the hair, it looked so realistic. She asked him how he got that, and then he showed her again. And then she mimicked the pattern. She being right-handed tried her best to mimic what he did, and the hair texture started to come out more realistic. And she used that occasion to say to me, Wazari, never think you are too old to learn from a child, or that you know so much that you can't learn from anybody else, especially people not in your profession. And that came to me when I was having a conversation with my sister, and my sister said, you know, Wazari, probably God allowed it to burn out that way on purpose. It probably is God's will that it came out like that. And when she said that, I remembered what Mrs. Redding said, and I decided reluctantly to put it in the show. So now I put that piece in the show, and early out in the show I see a crowd around the piece and people talking and so on. So I thought initially that people were criticizing it because I never felt so convicted that it was suitable for the show, because it didn't come out how I wanted it to come out. But people were raving over the piece, and I saw a gentleman, Mr. Sinclair, he came across to me and he said when he saw the work, he didn't expect to see the maker of the work being so young. You know, he said it looked like the work of some master, a master potter who had years behind him. You know, so when I heard that, I was pleasantly surprised, because yeah, I didn't see it as mastery or anything like that. The good thing is I know and I knew at that point in time how the piece got the way it did, how what caused it to look like that. I realized what caused it, and it became a part of a process that I developed. You know, I'm not going into all the details on that, you know, it's proprietary to some level and you have to have some competitive advantage, you know. But yeah, that teapot opened so many doors. And I remember there's this area of the scriptures where Christ was speaking about the stone that the builder refused became the chief cornerstone. And there is this Jewish legend that when the temple was being built, you know, there was a stone that didn't fit anywhere. And, you know, the stone kept getting relegated to a corner, kept being ignored for stones that were better hewn. And then eventually, the builders came to the realization that they needed a stone that could bear the weight of the temple. Really bear the entire weight of the temple, and that stone ended up becoming the perfect stone to secure the entire temple structure. And I remember how initially I did not feel so inclined to have anything to do with that pot, but that pot, that single pot, opened up a lot of doors for me. That single pot opened up a whole world for me, because the person who beat everybody to the punch was the photographer who did all the photography for the Bank of Jamaica's calendar that would be issued out in 2005. He bought the pot, and he was so in love with the pot, he decided that he would not make that calendar and nothing to do with the pot. So I got on the calendar, you know. And with just 4 years experience as a professional potter, I was numbered with 11 of the best potters you can find in Jamaica. You know, names like Gene Pearson, who is my favorite Jamaican artist, period. Gene Pearson was on the calendar. Jean Boucher was on the calendar. Norma Harrock was on the calendar. Margaret McGee, Alison Sinclair, some real heavy hitters, Michael Lane, you know. I was really amazed, and to this day I'm very grateful I got to be included in that group of potters, you know. And then over time my career opened up and started to build out a client base, and the journey just continued. Got featured in the Jamaican magazine, got featured in a number of magazines, got featured on television, got a number of interviews and so on. And I really started to enjoy an illustrious career. I started to enjoy an illustrious career, you know. And I feel so blessed that I got that opportunity. I got all those opportunities and the opportunity to just be a creative professional. I've been at it for over 20 years now, and it has been a blessing. You know, another high point of my career was 2017 when I was selected to be a part of a delegation of ceramists who were to go to Tanzania, East Africa, to be a part of a training exercise, and also to come back to Jamaica with a return to work program. And sometime before going to Tanzania, I remember talking to one of my friends, and I remember relating to her how I wanted to get masks from different cultures and from different artists and make a mask wall in my home. You know, just collect masks from different cultures. And at the time when I was sharing this idea, she later said to me that when I was sharing the idea, it seemed like a fantasy. She said it was so childlike and sounded like a fantasy, because at the time I wasn't really traveling. You know, when I was younger, I traveled. I went to places like Florida, New York, Canada. But when I got to college, I think I traveled only once in my college years. And then after that, the embassy was saying that I don't have any strong ties to Jamaica, and you know, they started to see it as a security risk, I believe. And it was shortly after 9/11 that I finished